If you're like me, you take your Honda Monkey in a little bit more extreme conditions probably than what it's designed for. I'm talking about off-road. So, being a dirt bike rider for most of my life and an off-road type of person, naturally when I get a bike, I'm going to try to take it off-road, even if it's a bike that's not really supposed to go off-road. Hence the Honda Monkey. The Honda Monkey is a really cool bike in its OEM form. It's meant for the street, it's meant for the neighborhood, even for the pit and paddock, just for cruising around, having a good time. However, the DNA of the Honda Monkey is off-road. The smallest of Honda Monkey back when they were created in the late 60s all the way through the early 70s and even to the Z50s of the 90s, they always were designed for off-road. So that's where I was coming from, was those old bikes, the nostalgia of the little mini trail. So basically when I got the Honda Monkey, it was about doing off-road. So obviously it's not the best choice for off-road. However, it was my quest to make it like the older bikes to where you could go off-road and it can handle whatever you throw at it. So here we are a couple of years later. After having the Honda Monkey for, I don't know, a couple of months, I realized that the suspension was way too soft for both a 200-pound person like myself and for doing any sort of activity that required catching a little bit of air, such as going over a jump or going through pothole type, sharp obstacle type stuff, like if you're going down a rocky trail or something that's going to bottom out the suspension. So basically the rear shocks are as soft as pillows. They had to go almost instantly. But I really procrastinated on the next part, which was the front forks. I mostly procrastinated because I knew it was a big job and it required a lot of time to do it, and it was going to be a big production to film it. So here I am today. We've finally done that job. I've finally improved the performance of the front forks on the Honda Monkey. I went with the Öhlins kit because I have this on my Honda Grom and it's absolutely phenomenal. There's only a couple of kits available out there. There's one from Öhlins, which is what I went with. There's a Racing Bros kit, and I'm sure there's one or two other that provide springs and the stuff you need to do it. The most important part though is that you get the proper valving. So with the Öhlins kit, I knew I liked the way that valving felt. I have it on the Grom and I put that Grom through absolute torture. I jump it, I go off-road, I do everything with it. Never seems to bottom out, works great. So that's what I chose to go with on the Monkey based on that experience. So knowing that I liked the Öhlins front fork kit already, the next step was to figure out what I needed to do to perform this work. Obviously, you need the Öhlins kit, which is back here in the box. That was step one. And the next thing was to figure out what I needed to do the job. So did a little bit of research. There's a couple other videos out there that are pretty good that show you how to do this, mostly with the Honda Grom. However, I wanted to provide this experience on the Honda Monkey. So that's what we're going to do today. Before we go ahead and jump into the installation, which I'm just going to provide in a fun, easy to follow montage style format. I'm not going to provide instruction along the way. I will pop in here and there and add in my comments on some stuff that might need a little bit more explaining than just watching it over video. But for the most part, if you're like me, you can scan through the installation process and see exactly what's going on with the steps in that process. And if you have the directions from the kit, they explain how to do this, but they don't elaborate on everything. They don't give you the step-by-step. They just say, remove this, install this, take this off, torque this to this. They don't say exactly how to get to that point, so they're very brief. So, like I said, if you're like me, You'll scan through this video and you'll see how I've done that specific part, and hopefully it helps you out. Now, as you can see back here, there's a lot of stuff on this table. This is basically everything I needed to do in order to perform this job, and it's not even everything that I really needed. I'll explain that in a minute. So essentially, you have to arm yourself with quite an array of tools and lots of paper towels. I'll tell you that right now. There's a lot of oil involved with this job. You're going to get it all over the place, all over your hands. If you're not careful, all over your face and body, because you pull the whatever. So you'll find out. So there's a lot of stuff involved. There's a lot of tools. There's a couple of special tools that you really need. And if you don't have them, you're going to hit a wall and a roadblock and figure out, what do I do now? So let's go over the tools that you're going to need for this job. I'm going to show you, kind of pick it up, go through the tools with you, and my thoughts on that. So as you can see, there's a lot of tools on the table behind me. Instead of going through one by one and listing everything that you're going to need, I'm going to keep this video shorter, and I'm going to list all this stuff in the description, and you can actually pause it. I'll have a nice picture up here, and you can kind of see what you're going to need. But essentially, here's the gist of it. You're going to want to sort out these special tools before you get involved in this job. So in the instruction here, the Öhlins instructions, you're going to see there's two special tools that you'll need. One's a clamp. This is to hold the fork tubes in a vise so you can work with them. And the other thing is a giant hex. Now the Öhlins tool is just the hex, not a socket, and it's long. It's long for a reason, because on reassembly you need to plunge down into the bottom of the fork tube. The axle mounts that screw onto the fork tube, you need a long hex to plunge down in there to tighten the fork tubes all the way. That's where you're going to have your problem. I don't have that hex tool here because I borrowed this from David at DHM. He's local to me, and he kind of bailed me out. Instead of having to buy these, just borrowed them from him. The only thing he didn't have was that hex tool. So I didn't know how important it was until I got up to the point where I figured out it was important. Luckily, I had this 14mm hex from other suspension projects, and I was able to disassemble everything just fine. The reassembly is where it comes into play. So what I ended up doing was having to make this special tool, and I basically found a 9/16 bolt and put some jam nuts on it, and 9/16 head bolt. So the head of the 9/16 bolt is the same size as that 14mm, and this was able to plunge down and allow me to get the 50 foot-pounds of torque onto that axle tube. So the heat gun is super important because the axle mounts that screw onto the fork tubes are Loctited. I've never seen so much Loctite in my life. They're on there that strong. Maybe add in a little bit of rust too, like my bike. Hasn't really been kept outside, hasn't been used much, but there was still surface rust that made it really hard. With the fork oil back here, I went with the Bel-Ray 5-weight. OEM is also 5-weight. Some people go heavier on the fork oil to try to avoid having to do this project the right way. While that might work for them, I wanted to maintain the performance of the shock. I wanted those valves to be able to work the way they were designed to work with the weight of oil they were designed to work with. So I went with the stock weight. I did not go with the Öhlins brand. I went with the Bel-Ray because I already had it. I don't think that's going to matter too much in the grand scheme of things. And everything else back here, a ratio right. That's going to be important to make sure you have the exact amount of oil to put back in the fork tubes. And other convenience items, I like electric impact. It's good to have something to catch the oil from the fork tubes. This project's going to be a mess. Make sure you have a lot of paper towels. Other than that, there's a lot of special tools. Not a lot, but a couple of special tools needed. Öhlins tools, obviously, but you're going to need some big size sockets. You're going to need a big socket for the top caps of the forks. I didn't have that, so I made do with the crescent wrench. Your standard open end wrenches, socket set will get you by, stuff you probably already have. So torque wrenches, another important thing if you like to keep everything torqued to the OEM spec. I'll try to list all those torques as well throughout the video. Okay, so I'm really looking forward to getting this project done. I really want the fork performance on this monkey. I want to take this bike off-road more. I plan on taking it on a big off-road trip here in about a month, and I want it to perform this time. I've gone several years without doing this project for a reason, because I was procrastinating based on the difficulty of it. Like I said, I'm a shade tree mechanic. I've said this before. I'm not a professional. These directions are how I did it, and I made the project work. There are other professional directions out there, mainly the manufacturers. There's also some other YouTube videos that are pretty good from the big parts guys like Partzilla or Revzilla or whatever. You know, those guys tend to do some pretty professional productions. I tried my best though, making it more relative to what your common guy like you or me would have in their garage already, and if they don't, how to get around those things. So with that, let's get down to the project here. Let's get these fork inserts in. I want some good suspension. You ready? I'm ready. Let's go.